Good morning. I'm News Center Maine's Zach Blanchard, and this is Political Brew. I'm joined now by Republican analyst Phil Harriman and Democrat Ken Altschuler. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Zach.
I want to start on a serious note. It was no doubt a tough week here in Maine. 4 people killed and 3 others injured in a shooting spree in the towns of Bowdoin and Yarmouth. The alleged shooter released from prison just days before. And it's already has a lot of people talking about gun laws. Well, this is what the editorial board of the Portland Press Herald had to say about this. The headline reading, "Our view, when getting firearms is easy, nowhere is safe," taking aim at legislators for not recognizing the risk of gun violence here in Maine. So it raises the question, in a state where it's a big tradition to own guns and to hunt, do you believe that the Press Herald was right with this headline?
Actually, I think they're a little bit off the mark, Zach. The fact is this person was incarcerated a day before. The records show that he was likely to commit more crimes. He legally should not have had a gun. There's so much more to this story in terms of what are we doing to prevent this type of incident happening when we know someone has the potential to create this sort of heartbreak.
But Ken, is it worth a closer look by lawmakers?
Of course, but it's not going to happen. And I said long ago when Sandy Hook happened, when you have 24 elementary school children slaughtered and nothing happens, this is minor. I mean, look at what we had. We had a cheerleader going up to a door and getting shot. We had a young man who went to pick up his brother getting shot. We have a woman who drives into a driveway and gets shot. We are gun happy. It's not going to change. We don't want to do anything about it. The NRA is too powerful, and all the politicians kowtow to him. It's not going to change.
I really disagree with that. I think
let's pause for a second, and we'll keep going. I spoke with the leader of the legislature's gun safety caucus this week about this, and she says she wants to work across the aisle to take real action. Take a listen.
Unfortunately, an event like has happened this week makes everybody think about it. We don't know the details, of how this person got his hands on a firearm, but we certainly know that he should not have had one. And now 4 people are dead. 1 woman's fighting for her life, and communities around the state are just shaken to their core.
And this session, there are already some bills in the works, including background checks for private sales and 72-hour waiting periods. Phil, I'll let you finish your thought there. Do you think that Republicans and Democrats can get those kinds of bills passed?
Well, perhaps they can, but to me, the root cause of this is what's causing the behavior that brings us to these stories. Guns have been around, our society from the beginning. The propensity to use them in this way is shocking, and it's about the choices the person is making to do this. Why are they behaving this way?
So, Phil, we always say it's mental health. It's mental health, and that's a good excuse, but guns are designed for one thing.
There's more to it than that.
Guns are designed to kill. That's what they do. And we're gun happy. You can get one easily. Background checks, we don't want to expand them. We don't want to have loopholes closed and we don't want to do anything, because you do one thing and you're fearful of infringing on the Second Amendment, which is frankly debatable the way it's been interpreted. So as long as people are scared of any slippery slope, nothing will change.
All right, shifting gears now to the big news surrounding the CMP corridor project and a big win for the power company. A jury ruling that the New England Clean Energy Connect project did in fact establish so-called vested rights and can move forward. Of course, this overrides when Maine voters rejected the project back in 2021. Phil, what kind of precedent does this set?
I think it sets the right one. I know people have very strong opinions on both sides of this issue, but the notion that if you don't like the outcome of someone who followed the law, who went through all of the regulatory permitting process, and then go to referendum and then retroactively undo what was legally done, would have set a very chilling message for Maine's economy.
A very bad example of people's referendum, because Phil's absolutely right. They passed every regulatory scrutiny. They did everything right. The issue was, did they accelerate the construction to have vested rights? Frankly, I'm surprised at the verdict, because I think they did. I'm glad it passed. I'm for the CMP corridor, but I think they sped things up to kind of have vested rights, and I'm surprised the jury found otherwise.
Yeah,
I'm glad they did.
Unanimously.
Yes.
You actually agree on this.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Sometimes. Did you say I was right?
Yeah, but going on the bigger picture here, there's a lot of questions around the referendum process in general and the influence of out-of-state money. In a case like this, does this kind of throw a wrench into maybe the future of ballot initiatives in the state. Ken?
I wish. You know, I'm not a big fan of people's referendums. So we have a representative government. We elect people to make decisions. If you don't like their decisions, vote them out. People's referendums, there's a rare time where maybe a veto would be appropriate, but this is an example that was completely misused and completely came from out of state. I would get rid of people's referendums. I don't agree with them. I don't believe in them. Portland has been a disaster, although sometimes they've actually voted in the right way. So I get rid of them. I think they're misused and they're abused by out-of-state people.
Wow, this is another instance of Ken and I agreeing, at least in the middle. I think what's happened, Zach, over time is that activists who have public policy issues that they really want to get passed, they're bypassing the legislature and going through this referendum process. And that, I think, what Ken is saying, we should tighten that
Well,
up.
is that true if the legislature can act on the measure before sending it to voters?
It can, yes, but oftentimes legislators are respectful of the petition process and say, we're going to let it go out to the voters, or they put up a competing measure, as we've seen a few times.
All right, speaking of the legislature, now to the ongoing issues with child protective services. This week, a committee voted down a bill aimed at getting parents legal help while they're being investigated by the agency. What kind of message do you think this sends, Ken?
Well, you know, I used to do DHHS work. I represented parents, and I think the theory was have legal access to parents before DHHS files a petition, which frankly is a really great idea. I actually agreed with the proposal. I also agreed with it not passing because of money. You're talking about a huge investment. And, you know, where do you draw the line in spending money? Now, I'm not going to have you agree with me about spending money because I think this is important, but I think that the theory that you're entitled to legal representation is triggered by DHHS filing a petition. So as laudable as this is, I don't think you can provide parents with legal representation before DHHS actually does something.
You know, I see it a little differently. This is one of the most emotional and hot button issues in Maine today. And this was a pilot project that they were proposing. The state is now spending $2 billion more in the biennial budget than when Governor Mills took office. They couldn't find enough money to make this pilot project work or not.
Yeah, but it obviously is a continued conversation around how do we hold parents accountable while also helping them navigate the process and keeping it fair.
Well, and how do we represent indigent people? I mean, it's a much bigger issue, and that's the committee that looked at it. And we have a quasi public defender system. We have court-appointed attorneys who, frankly, don't get paid a whole lot of money. And so there's a whole lot of issues about legal representation that would take a lot of money if you try and get everybody represented who deserve it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. The Weekend Morning Report is back right after this. Welcome back. I'm News Center Maine's Zach Blanchard, and this is Political Brew. I'm joined once again by Republican analyst Phil Harriman and Democrat Ken Altshuler. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
The abortion debate continues with all eyes on the Supreme Court this week when it comes to the most commonly used medication by women all across the country, mifepristone. Of course, this all comes after the federal judge in Texas ruled the FDA's approval over 20 years ago now is invalid. Maine's Attorney General signed onto a brief to block that ruling. And in all transparency, we're recording on a Friday here, but this decision is going to be a big one for women all across the country and puts a lot of pressure on the states. In this case, Mills has already said maybe stockpiling this drug. What are your thoughts on it, Phil?
Well, it's clearly the most important issue in the legal and political arena today, and I think it's time for the court to make their decisions, let the Supreme Court, if it has to go to that point, make a final decision, and let's move on from this. There is way too many men involved in a decision about women's reproductive rights.
Well said, Phil.
Acknowledging that we're all men at the table right now.
So, first of all, I love that a conservative judge in Texas became the most activist judge in history of the United States by making his personal views make a decision. He basically ruled the FDA was wrong in declaring that a drug was safe. Well, he's not a doctor. He barely is a judge, frankly. I don't know if he was a lawyer, but he doesn't know the law very well. Then you have the Washington State justice who said the opposite, right? So it has to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is really only going to decide whether or not to stay the decision until the full case gets heard before them. And it will get heard before him because you have competing appellate decisions. So, yes, but ultimately, and Phil, I'm also, it's great that you point out that abortion is the issue, and a lot of Republicans did not see what happened in 2022 and did not understand that abortion drove that election. And if the Republicans don't find an answer to what the American public wants, which seems to be pro-choice, they're going to lose in 2024.
Even in the state's gubernatorial race, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So what does this mean for Republicans as this battle wages on?
Well, I think part of it, Zach, is if you go back to the gubernatorial race, Governor LePage, seeking to be reelected, said, I have no interest in changing existing law, and Governor Mills saying, don't vote for LePage because he's going to change law. There was no indication that Governor Mills was going to bring forward this bill that is now before the legislature, greatly expanding the opportunities for abortion. So it's going to be interesting to see how our legislature reacts to her bill.
I feel Governor Mills was clearly pro-choice, and
I don't disagree.
And
but
Governor LePage was clearly pro-life. He just was
no
downplaying
question.
it.
But there was no indication in the campaign that Governor Mills was going to move even further.
But that was because of the Dobbs decision. She was reacting to that Supreme Court decision. So I think she went too far, and I don't agree with her. But she was reacting to the decision.
All right, from state campaigns to national ones, he's no doubt shying away from it, but looks like President Joe Biden could announce he's running for a second term next week. That's according to multiple reports. This week, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. threw his hat into the ring. There's been a lot of talk about whether Biden is fit for another term. Will that be a concern for Democrats, Ken?
I think most Democrats would prefer Joe Biden not to run again. I don't think Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden does not have dementia, but he does appear to be feeble. The way he looks doesn't cause people to be confident in him. I think he can beat Donald Trump. I'm not sure he can beat anyone else. And he may win the election anyway, but there's also a point of Kamala Harris being there. And one of the arguments is if Joe Biden doesn't make a second term, who's going to be the president? And a lot of people don't like Kamala Harris. My preference would be a newer, younger blood in the campaign. But Joe Biden sees himself as having victories after victories, maybe overstating a little bit. He's going to run again. I think it's unfortunate for the Democratic Party.
And Phil, obviously, President Trump has announced his intentions. Ron DeSantis hasn't formally announced, but was just in New Hampshire last week, kind of giving a stump speech. Do either of them have a chance against a Biden run?
Well, I think part of what we're seeing now is that this increase in support among Republicans for Trump and the decrease in DeSantis support has everything to do with what is perceived to be this unfair indictment of him in New York. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the months ahead and how the public opinions change. But I do think, Zach, that as you get closer and closer to the nomination, more and more Republicans and independents are going to voice their opinions about who can actually win in the general election.
And we'll see. There's plenty of time left. Finally, winners and losers. Ken, we'll start with you.
So I'm segueing on what you said. The winner of the week, once again, is Donald Trump. Last time it was loser and the winner of the week because his numbers have skyrocketed. Ron DeSantis has just sunk. It's unbelievable. His points have gone down. He's not played well. And Donald Trump, despite being indicted, and despite the fact he's going to get indicted in Georgia, his numbers and his fundraising is off the charts. So he's unfortunately my winner of the week. The losers of the week is the American public, who has to live in an environment that is gun happy, and it's not safe to go to the wrong door anymore. And and I say that facetiously, but I have to tell you, it's really a shame. We've had more people die from mass shootings in 2023 than we've had days in 2023. That is an indictment of the American culture.
Bill?
My loser of the week is the whole system that enabled this man to kill 4 people and then shoot at 3 others. The system clearly needs to be addressed so that we don't have people who shouldn't have guns in possession of guns. My winner of the week are the law enforcement officers from my hometown of Yarmouth to the state police, county sheriff. They did their job and did it well.
All right, Phil, Ken, thanks for being with us. And we'll see you next time on Political Brew. The Weekend Morning Report is back right after this.